part 2.
Part 2.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's an intriguing book.
Yeah.
A lot of intriguing characters and thoughts. Yeah, I know we spent considerable time talking about Shasta. We touched on some of the other ideas in that book, like that you are never allowed to know the full gamut of other people's stories and why things happen the way they do, and that has always struck me in that book as just very true, just a very true thing in life. You just never quite see the full overall arching, from beginning to end picture.
Yeah.
And maybe it's that if you did, faith and trust would not be things that we really needed so much.
Well, I mean, sorry. Well, it's what did they say in Hebrews? Faith is the assurance of things. Faith is the something of things hoped for, and the assurance of things we do not see, or whatever.
Yeah.
So it's, we saw everything.
Yeah, the King James, the substance of things hoped for.
That's what it is. I know.
And the evidence of things unseen.
Yeah.
Says it differently in many other translations.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's. And then it goes on to say just a few verses later that without faith, it's impossible to please God. So he creates environments where faith is required.
Yeah.
Therefore, if you always got all the information, you would presumably never need to have faith for anything.
Yeah.
And it's the whole, I've had atheists say this to me before a couple different times, different people. Why doesn't God just, if he's so real, why doesn't he just demonstrate himself in obvious ways, demonstrably to everybody? And the answer there is, well, A, that would not require any faith. But even more than that, I think you have to have a will to believe. And I think that a lot of atheists there's a sin of unbelief. They don't actually want to believe. Because they would have to give something up in order to do that. Credibility in a secular society, academic credibility, they would have to give up their own pride and arrogance, whatever it is.
Or what they want, their sins they know they're committing. Or...
Sure. I mean, it's uncomfortable to think that there would be a moral authority who would require certain things of you, especially if you want to live in sin. So, if you don't, what would happen? Jesus would show up in the clouds and in a booming voice say, "I'm real," and he would perform signs and wonders, and the second all that was over, people would go like, "Wow, must have been some planets shifting around in the heavens," or they would immediately explain that away.
Yeah, when we explain things away, even people who maybe believe in the prophetic can explain prophetic dreams. Well, maybe I had too much pizza before I went to bed, or something like that. So even as Christians, we explain things away.
Oh, was that person healed, or was their medication fixed? You hear stuff like that all the time. They don't phrase it that way, but instead of saying maybe God healed this person, it's they must have finally gotten such and such sorted out. Well, that's a rejection of faith, sort of. So.
Well, I know even when my dad was dealing with cancer and everything, and he would tell the doctors, well, we had a lot of people praying for us. Well, at one specific time, the doctor just kind of went, yeah, sure, whatever. Even though it was so obvious, there had been so much, like the way his good numbers jumped in ways they'd never seen before, and everything is. And I said something, and I think my parents had thought the same thing. I said, well, you don't know that he's not turning that over in his mind when he can't sleep at night or something like that, or you never know that's true. The harvest that can sprout from that down the road.
Yeah. Yep. You just plant the seed and you leave it with the Holy Spirit to do the rest. So, but there has to at some point be a will to believe. Has to be, because otherwise there's a will to doubt. And like we're saying, for a lot of Christians, there's too much of a will to doubt, even for Christians. So then when you think about people living apart from God, there's really a strong pull to doubt, to trust only in what you can see, smell, touch, taste, what you can produce, the money you can make, the things you can do with your own brain, whatever. So anyway, I think one of the hugest takeaways from this book is this thing, that you are not given all the information possible, because if you were, you could not have the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things unseen. You could not actually please God because you wouldn't need any faith.
Yeah.
So he has to give you a scenario where you can actually please him.
Mhm.
Kind of like the diggory in the garden sort
Yeah.
of thing in Magician's Nephew.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's talk about Rabadash for a second. He is
Love it.
yeah. He's actually kind of one of those, I don't know, it makes me, it's almost like you love to hate him because he's so bad, but he's almost comical in some ways. I don't know, maybe I'm
He's
wrong.
almost comical. He's one of those villains that is like, okay, he's bad, but he's not completely bad.
Yeah, 'cause
You know?
he's basically a person.
Yeah, there's a shred of something in there that's not pure evil. And of course, we see that come out when it's forced to, in the end of his life, when he's forced to stay, in Tashbaan and just be a ruler of his own people.
Yeah.
Which is what he needed, but he had to have the guardrails come way in and narrow him down to like, listen, you can't be trusted with anything else, but just this,
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, he's an interesting character in some ways too.
He's a rapscallion. He's
Yeah.
just,
He has the perfect name.
yeah.
Well, I just think some of the illustrations of him in the book are just some of the better drawn ones because whether it's him like kicking the Grand Vizier, it just sums up whatever. Or one of my favorite things is when he's like running right after his father tells him, yes, you could go attack Anvar, get Queen Susan or whatever. He just looks like, so excited. I just think he's just excited to go be bad or whatever. Just like kind of like a rebellious teenager almost.
He's excited to go be bad. I think that's well said. It's some people, there is a delight. There's a delight. Our flesh delights in sin,
in naughtiness
right?
Or whatever.
Yeah. So there's a certain delight that goes along with certain sins.
Mm-hmm.
For Rabadash, he delighted, it seemed like, in virtually all of them. He was proud beyond all belief, just reckless, totally treacherous, I mean, he's going to go attack their neighboring kingdom for what? Just because,
Yeah.
it stands in his way, and he has to get to sweet Susan, so. I don't know. He is comical, certainly in the end, but I think he's relatable in that way too. Like there are certain sins for all of us that just bring about a particularly godless, no fear of God sort of delight in that sin, So.
Yeah. Or I think one of my all-time favorite pictures in all of the Narnia drawings is him hanging from the castle wall. That's one of the greatest ways ever.
Hanging from the castle wall, yeah.
Like a piece of washing hung out.
So well done, and so ridiculous, right? Rabadash, the ridiculous. It's very well said. Yeah. But I like how he's dealt with, because even in dealing with him, he's not just off with his head. He is given these certain parameters. He can't operate outside of these parameters, and once he has that locked in, he actually does okay.
Yeah, he turns into a semi-decent human.
Semi-decent human being, and I'd like to think that all of us, if given a real solid second chance with somebody or in some situation in a career and whatever, wouldn't waste it either. You'd like to think that. But
yeah. And I know we've touched on this a little bit, but I love when they're, I don't know, are they actually having a trial, or are they just discussing what to do with him? I think they're just discussing. They're having a council, just kind of.
I don't think they have an official trial, do they?
No, because they're just trying to figure out. But he hadn't even been put in prison. He'd been just locked up in his room or something like that. And how they're talking about, like, well, he's just unredeemably bad, and this is what should happen, and really, you could cut off his head. No one would think anything of it. I mean, it'd be your right. And then Edmund just says, well, yeah, it's true, but even a traitor may mend. I have known one that did. And I remember listening, I'd read the book like once as a kid, and then I'd read it later, but I listened to the audio dramas like 1,000,001 times. Drove my parents crazy with them. But they actually left out that line, and I think it's so sad, because I know it seems like a throwaway line, but it's such a interesting part of like Edmund's story arc too.
I don't know who would consider it a throwaway line. I consider it one of the finest lines in all of Narnia. It just is, it's so powerful, the power of redemption. There's hardly anything more powerful than that. Forgiveness and whatever, you know, so, yeah, I mean, I was reading in, this book, actually. I just finished this book, The Case for Faith, Lee Strobel. Follow-up to The Case for Christ. And he gets to the end and he just kind of sums it up by saying, listen, I basically boil it down to, there are three real categories for faith that are strong arguments. And one of them is just the transformation of the human being. And he goes on to tell the story of a pastor in Atlanta or somewhere down in Georgia who, you know, he tells his backstory about being just this punk, this thug, this evil, whatever. I don't know if he was a gang member or whatever, but he ends up in the midst of trying to rob a guy's house. The guy pulls a gun on him, and he ends up shooting the guy, the house owner, and killing him. Gets life in prison, all this stuff, and the transformation that comes over him when Jesus gets a hold of him in jail. I mean, it so transformed him that it affected everybody around him. His entire cell block was known as like the block, you know, to be in the peace, the love of God that emanated from that. And then he eventually gets pardoned way early and becomes a minister. And it's like the transforming power of God is second to none. And so a line like that, I don't know how a person could consider it a throwaway.
I mean, I don't know if they consider it a throwaway. They just didn't include it.
No.
And
well, obviously they did on some level.
Yeah. And I mean, for me, one thing that's so powerful is Edmund recognizes in himself, you know, like you see so often in his story, how he passes on the grace he had received to other people. Even though, I mean, technically, like, he could have killed Rabadash right at the end of the battle, even though this battle was technically over, and no one would have thought anything of it, because he had, you know, not only attacked their neighboring country, he was, had would have tried to hold him hostage, was gonna marry his sister, or, you know, make his sister his mistress or whatever. I mean, really, when you think about it, but it's just so interesting to see how he just passes on the grace and the...
Passes on the grace, yeah. And I think that's what we're asked to do. We are really powerfully told to do that in, Matthew 18, the parable of the unforgiving servant. Like, here I was gracious with you and erased your massive debt, and then you turn around and you're choking out your guy who owes you a few pennies. Like, go throw this guy into the dungeon, you know? Yeah. I think to be extended grace in the way we are by God, and then to turn around and be ungracious with others, is a high crime and misdemeanor, you know, in the kingdom of God. So I think the levels of transformation are interesting in this book and just throughout Narnia. But you have Edmund and his journey. You have Shasta, who he's got a peasant mindset. He doesn't think in the way that he should as a person aspiring to a kingship. He doesn't have the courage he's supposed to have. He doesn't have the skills he's supposed to have. So there's a transformation in him. There's this transformation in Erebus, away from being this self-centered little brat who only ever does stuff for her and...
Or Bree and Wynn, too. Well, Wynn, not so much, but... Yeah.
Right, yeah. I mean, she's pretty solid. In general, but just the...
It's like he always has one character that's consistently good. In his books.
Yeah, one or maybe a couple. Hwyn in this book, I would say King Loon is just a solid character, pun intended. You know, very large, robust man, but also just a great character.
Yeah. Well, isn't there somebody who's written, I think it's like Live Like a Narnian or something like that, who says that King Loon is actually his favorite character too. In
all of Narnia, which is maybe a little absurd since he's such a supporting character. In one of the books. However, you read about King Loon and the way he's described, and you're like, yes, this is how I want to live my life. What is his slogan? What is King Loon's slogan about being first into battle, last in retreat? you know.
I think that's from the Magician's Nephew. Wait, maybe it is from there too. I know it's in the Magician's Nephew because,
Okay.
you know, Aslan is asking King Frank, can you do all these kingly
yeah.
things? But maybe it's in there too. Again,
there's something I feel like from The Horse and His Boy, without having the quotation in front of you, where he's saying, you know, will you be, maybe I am remembering the charge that Aslan gives to King Frank.
Yeah.
To be the last to eat in time of famine and all that kind of stuff. Maybe I'm mixing two.
Yeah, you might be, because
that actually does.
That actually, you know, you're right. There is a charge that he has about you don't have to be the last. You have to look happier over a scantier meal than any of your subjects or something like that, because I don't know, you have to keep the morale up. You have to lead the country or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just, but yeah, he is a fantastic character too.
He is. Yeah, he's so jolly. He's so courageous. He's so magnanimous, gracious with people. You know, he kind of reminds me of kind of a, you know, like a Jim King Senior, my wife's dad. That kind of personality, just so great with people, so happy.
Yeah.
So,
kind of the larger than life.
Yeah, and big and robust and loud and fun and anyway. So
yeah. And then so we kind of have touched on Erebus. I don't know if there's anything else you want to say about
Erebus.
Yeah.
Erebus is very relatable for me. It's very easy to be proud. It's very easy to be incredibly judgmental of people. It's hard to admit that you maybe are lacking in character in some of the ways that Erebus admits. And I think just the moment where Shasta jumps off of Bree's back as he's galloping full tilt away from the lion, shows his mettle, faces down a beast that could have just one swipe and he's gone. I think it shows all of the rest of them just how much they underestimated him and how much they have overestimated their own courage.
Yeah.
And it's really a beautiful scene. It shows deep down the stuff that Shasta is made of, you know. My favorite line from Cars, my favorite line in the whole movie, is when Lightning stops, backs up at the very end, helps the king get across the finish line, even though, you know, that makes Lightning last when he should have won. And he comes over and he's talking to his crew, you know, his pit crew, and Doc says to him, "You've got a lot of stuff, kid." And when I think about that scene where Shasta hops off the horse and runs straight at a lion, I think of the voice of Doc. "You've got a lot of stuff, kid."
And then how he just said, and they're like, he had no weapon, so he literally just says, "Go home, like the Doc." It's like,
he just.
It's so funny.
It reminds me, there was this Canadian woman a while ago who was on the news because she was out for a walk. Did you ever see this? She was out for a walk and she was like, I felt like somebody was watching me. So I turned around and up the road, 200 yards away or whatever, is a mountain lion. She's by herself, no weapons, no nothing, you know. And she said, I turned on the loudest thing my phone could offer. It was like some rock music or something. And she's like holding it up and she's like, bad kitty, go home. And it just walks off. And so another complete, like to run at a lion going, go home, bad kitty, you know. Sounds completely perfect. A chance to operate in faith. He also gives them chances over and over and over and over again. You see this right from the beginning of the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. Like, they get chances to operate in courage too. Encourage courage. I think that's one of the themes of the whole series.
Yeah.
We have to be encouraging people to be courageous.
Yeah.
And that scene is just so brilliant. Much like Peter having to face down, what's the wolf's name?
Morgrim, I think. Yeah, Morgrim.
Morgrim, you know, and there are many of these scenes, like they're going to battle going, I might die, and what does that mean? If I die in Narnia, am I dead in, you know, real life, quote unquote?
Yeah. That's one thing I've always wondered too. I mean,
yeah.
the what ifs, like what happens if somebody died? I mean, nobody ever does.
Right.
But still, it's kind of interesting.
And then in the end, they die in real life, and than they're actually alive in Narnia.
Yeah, well, kind of.
Or sort of Narnia. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's the heaven. That's such a.
But, yeah.
That's such a weird. That's such a interesting thing. But
Yeah.
Well, I know one thing I see talking about like, Wynn being such a good character, Erebus, whatever. I think it's so. What C.S. Lewis does so often is he presents these opposite characters that you can see yourself in, like Lucy and Susan. To me, they're like kind of they're like the two examples of how Christians can be, like the doubting Thomas or the steadfast, whatever.
Feeding doubt,
yes.
Or are you just like, no, it was him. I know it was him. Even if none of the rest of you chumps saw him, I know it was.
Yeah, and I think like so often it's like I want to be Lucy. I want to be like Lucy and whatever. But I think so often we're the Susans. We're the ones saying, well, I don't know. Do I really see it? And it's just so, so beautiful to see the contrast. Like, oh, are you Wynn or are you Bree? Well, I'd like to be Wynn, but more often I'm probably Bree.
Correct.
Because I can be very arrogant and I can, stick my nose. I can think, well, I'm so good. I do this and I do this.
Very highly of myself.
Yeah. Or, you think about the story of the Pharisee and the publican, that arrogance. It's like, we don't say, I tithe all my cumin, I do this and this, whatever he lists that he does. But we can say, I go to church twice a week, I teach Sunday school, I do this, I do this, I do this, and I'm so good. It's so easy to find our, like, think we're better than people because, well, at least I'm not bad like this chump or something like that.
It's very easy to think that way. And to oftentimes not even recognize it. Maybe this is what I love the most about that whole scene with Shasta running at the lion. Everybody has to come face to face. I mean, now they're all resting at the, except for Shasta, but the other three are all resting at the hermit of the Western Marsh. Is that what it's called?
I think it's Southern Marsh.
Southern Marsh, the hermit of the Southern Marsh. They're all resting there. And they're coming face to face with their inadequacies, with their faults. They're recognizing them for real. Like, I thought I was this great high-browed Tarkina who was so well-educated and well-bred, and I would never do anything even remotely like this cowardice that I displayed. Breed's even worse. Like, how many battles have I been a part of? How many wars have I fought in? How many times have I carried, my master courageously? And here I am just sprinting full tilt away from the women and children, while this little putz on my back that couldn't even ride a horse, a few weeks ago, is the one that really shows that he's got a lot of stuff. So
yeah,
I don't know. It is.
Yeah.
It's really good. So, what do you think of this notion that, where Aslan says to Shasta that the reward for excellence is more work?
I was just gonna bring that up too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what to think. I guess it's just kind of, we might not get the rewards until we get to heaven. I don't know.
Indeed, yeah. I mean, I think there's a real life correlation. Like, if you're excellent in what you do, often the promotion you get is to a higher responsibility, a higher calling, more work, if you will.
Well, to as much has been given, much will be demanded.
Right. And so, but I do think, I've often thought and said this even in church, I wish there was an appendix in the back of your Bible that was just like, this much good deed equals this much treasure in heaven, and this is the specific kind of treasure you're going to be able to expect,
Well,
of course it's not like that.
I mean, I know you say stuff like, oh, so I think so-and-so is going to have a huge mansion in heaven, or because they've done this or whatever, they've been,
right. I kind of say it tongue-in-cheek, but I actually believe that stuff too. I don't know what storing up treasure in heaven really looks like, but presumably we get different things. The thief on the cross, no time to actually store up treasure in heaven, as opposed to a lifelong Christian, whatever.
Well, that's one thing I've always wondered about too. Like, you see it is someone who, like, I don't know, like, let's just say like Hitler, a horrible person, or Stalin, and made like a deathbed salvation. Could happen. You never know. I mean, you never know what's going to happen. And I wonder if they would be welcomed into heaven differently than like someone like Mother Teresa. That's something I've always wondered about. Like,
the justice mechanism inside of us says, surely they would have to be
yeah.
welcomed differently, and don't call me Shirley. But I mean, you know, it just.
Don't call me Shirley.
You ever heard that?
No, tell me about later.
Surely you must be joking. I'm not joking, and don't call me Shirley. Anyway, yeah.
We're all tired today.
But it also brings up the bigger question, maybe, which is, why do we insist on seeing our sins as junior varsity types of sins in comparison to other people's? Listen, God, an infraction against God, even if it is small, even if it's within your own mind, is a sin. We just can't conceive of there being kind of a flat line, flat rate sin package. We think the more you sin, the more hell you're going to receive. No, I don't know. That's another thing. Is there a corresponding, can you store up treasure in hell?
Yeah.
Can you store up years of time in hell? Can you store up, whatever a year in hell means? I mean, we're going to be outside of time. Can you actually...
Like the annihilationist type.
Sure. If you can store up treasure and get more in heaven than another person that goes to heaven, can you get more in hell than another person who goes to hell? Because they were a good person and you were Hitler.
Yeah.
It stands to reason. It stands to reason that you could, maybe. We're never told that in Scripture. I'm just hypothesizing here. But anyway, yeah. I don't know. Shasta certainly has to reckon with, like, okay, do I want to be faithful and courageous and good and all these things? Because if it just means more work, more struggle, more whatever, responsibility, I don't know if I want that.
Yeah, because it can be really easy to think, I'm good with what I got. I just, I just want to coast along on my going to church and reading the Bible and being a good person or whatever.
Yeah.
Being the religious person or whatever versus... being a true Christian who, or saying, oh, I prayed that prayer years ago, I'm good, or whatever.
Yeah, the disciple versus the casually nominal, yeah. And of course, we can be both at many different times in our lives. So
we can get tired and be like, I don't want to serve anymore, I'm just tired.
Yeah, which is why Paul has to say to the Galatians, do not grow weary in doing good. For you will, reap a harvest in due time if you faint not. Well, it's pretty easy, especially in a year like this. Oh my goodness, you're thinking like, how much more of this contentiousness, tension, faction, church breaking into factions, how much more of this can I handle? And...
Or like how much more of this, people being rude about the masks, or...
Right, I mean,
not even.
Yeah, this was a tough week. This was a week unlike maybe any other all year, as far as just difficult conversations with people about. People are growing really, really tired of stuff on both sides, attitudes of people and mandates and all this stuff. It's very easy as a leader of anything this year, I think, to go, I'm growing weary in well-doing. I'm really growing weary. So, the invitation is just put out there again. Look, you have to trust me.
Can you trust?
You can't do this stuff. So. Yeah,
and can you trust that I know the end, or can you trust that none of this is a surprise to me. I've known it ever since. God has known exactly what's going to happen ever since He created the world.
Yeah, so He invites us again daily, will you put it in my hands? Will you just give these struggles over to me? Because, it's really hard not to just I'm just going to do this in my own strength.
Yeah.
So.
Alright, there's something else I was going to So going way back to the beginning, so what do you think about, Arshish? Do you think he's supposed to be like a villain, or do you think he's just kind of a punk or a person, or not a good person or whatever?
I think he's kind of indicative of just somebody living his life lost.
Mm-hmm.
Just lost. He doesn't know the truth. He doesn't know
Mm-hmm.
he doesn't know the way, the truth, and the life, right?
Mm-hmm.
He's not acquainted with Aslan.
He's a big talker. That's
Yeah. He's just sort of a prototype to me of anybody who's lost away from the Lord.
Yeah, there's nothing really
Why
wrong
would they
with
be
him.
good?
Yeah, there's nothing really wrong with him. I mean,
Right.
He's just a jerk.
Yeah. So I think, I know plenty of people who they don't know the truth and the goodness of God and end up thinking, like, in a year where coronavirus is scaring people, how do you live with that if you don't believe in God, if you don't know Him, and expect that if you were to die, you would actually end up with Him? And, so, yeah, I think Ashish is just like, I don't know, he's just kind of doing his thing.
Mm-hmm.
And he's kind of his personality's kind of mean.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah.
I don't think he's really supposed to be a villain.
Yeah. I know
Yeah.
one thing I think is interesting about, like, again, I know we talked about this last time, but how Aslan, like, had sent Shasta, like, did he blow the boat, or did he just, like, push it, or how did that, does it kind
Yeah,
of...
I can't remember if he says that he actually pushed the boat toward the shore or not. But.
Yeah, but he uses, bad people to accomplish his will, like I mean, I don't know if the Calorman that actually was in the boat was necessarily bad. It was the same kind of thing, just kind of misguided or whatever. And, Arshish is misguided. He uses those people to accomplish his will. And, it's kind of be like, well, did Shasta really learn anything from those? I mean, I don't know. It's kind of one of those things, like, you kind of wonder, like, what was the purpose of his?
Well, and you wonder how far God goes and how much He orchestrates things maybe it's to save one. So, Shasta finds out who he really is in the end.
Yeah.
And it's this majestic thing, but he would have never been lost and out of the fold of God's love and His plan and His will if he had grown up as the son of King Lune.
And he wouldn't have been able to save Arkenland. He wouldn't have been in Calorman. He wouldn't have heard what Erebus said, or...
He wouldn't.
Erebus wouldn't have heard, excuse me, then.
Yeah, right. They wouldn't have been able to save King Lune from the onslaught. But if we consider that that's not the real end game of Christianity, the end game of Christianity is people going to heaven, it's people knowing God and spending eternity with Him, then I think the even bigger storyline with Shasta being raised, where he is, by who he is, and how he eventually gets back. I think the real storyline is Erebus. Erebus is saved through that, if you will. Saved,
Yeah.
I mean, we're making corollaries here, but, like, how much will God upend somebody's life or allow things to be upended for that one? And presumably, there would have been some in King Lune's tribe who wouldn't have been ready to meet the Lord, so to speak.
Yeah.
When this army attacked, it also saves them or gives them opportunity to come to know Jesus. That's how we look at it in Christianity.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Would he do that for just Erebus?
Well, I mean, he would have died just for one person, so.
Yeah, which begs the extremely uncomfortable question. That would mean you would have had to nail Jesus to the cross. He's dying for you, and you would have been, pretty crazy.
It's crazy.
Crazy thought. But I think it's a fabulous book. I think it so beautifully demonstrates this transformational power that's at play in all of the books. The transformation of Uncle Andrew, at least the mild. The transformation of Eustace,
That one's pretty extreme.
That one's pretty extreme. There's just so much of that. And even just the transformation of these doughy little English kids, who leave England and they're like going into Narnia, maturing, learning, growing, coming back into their own world. with a whole lifetime of wisdom and courage.
That's one of the
and all this
weirdest
stuff.
things to me. Like the 15
it'd be
years.
so strange.
Yeah, I can't imagine that, to be adults and then to be kids again.
That part would be awful.
Sounds awful.
That's like going back to high school after you're out of it. You're like, ugh.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
So what do you think about, like, I mean, I don't know. Corin is kind of, what do you think about Corin? Do you think there's any, I don't know. I like him. I think he's kind of a, kind of a fun character. Almost. Corin. Excuse me, yeah, Corin.
Yeah, he's almost comic relief. He's, he's just a rascal. But a fun-loving rascal, unlike Rabadash, a dangerous rascal.
Yeah, he's not a bad person. What I think is funny is like how he's like that whole scene where he's telling Cora or Shasta and how he got into trouble. He's like, well, somebody said something not nice about Queen Simpson, so I knocked him down. And then he went crying out, and his brother came out, so I knocked him down too. And then I fought these 3 guys, and then they knocked me down, and then I went and eventually, then I took them and gave them something to drink until they fell asleep, and then I bought them a drinks or something, and then I came out and saw the boy who had started the whole trouble, so I knocked him down again.
Knocked him down again, yeah.
It's
he's just funny. He's obviously very high-spirited. He's energetic. He's all boy to the core, to the core. I didn't even see that one coming.
Yeah.
But yeah. Anyway, it's just, I think Lewis throws in, like a lot of movies, a lot of directors do this. They throw in some character who's just like fun.
Yeah.
It's like shameless fun.
Yeah.
And,
played for laughs.
Yeah. And he does that part well, And then, of course, he becomes a great fighter later on in life. And,
what is it? Didn't he, like...
a boxing champ, right?
Didn't he box a bear? Is that what I heard?
Something like that.
I don't remember this.
He's just a great fighter. He's presumably a great warrior, fighting for not just frivolous, ridiculous things.
And then, there's the not-so-funny thing where he, gets into the fight with the dwarf because... I think, wasn't it that they didn't want him to go into the battles? Like, he was gonna, they were supposed to stay next to each other, and then he had permission from King Edmund to tie their wrists together or something like that, and then Corin got mad, and he's
something
very hot-headed. That might be a good word for him.
He's a hothead. That is a very good word for him.
I mean, not a bad thing, just a, I
no,
don't know, it's just funny.
just a spirited rogue. So,
Yeah.
But yeah. Anyway, I'm probably gonna have to wrap it up here, but I think so. Yeah, we're moving on to Prince Caspian. Yeah, that'll be fun to discuss as well. So
Yeah, well, all the books are fun.
they are.
Except the last battle might not be as fun to me. But
Last battle's not so much fun, but it's very interesting to look at the end times. So yeah.
All right.
It's good. Very good.
Yeah.